Who's excited? Raise the roof. Woohoo! All right, good. Raise the roof, bringing that back. Okay. Like, what is that? My name is Sabrina Deschner, and I am the Assistant Director for Center for Leadership Development, and I am pleased to welcome you to our Women's History Month event, our Women in Leadership panel. We have a fantastic group of panelists who are the epitome of women in leadership. You can see them there on the welcome slide, and they will be introducing themselves shortly. I want to welcome the faculty, the staff, the alumni, the students, and thank you so much for joining us for our last event of the academic year. It's been great, and I'm excited to cap it off with this fantastic event. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to one of our Student Leadership Advisory Board members. Whoop, whoop. Sia Green, take it away.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, this evening. We are so excited to be here to give you three phenomenal panelists, three really inspirational women. So I will take this time now to introduce them, and then I will pass it on to Ayana, who will be giving the guiding questions. Lori Delone is the CIO of Cambia Healthcare Solutions. She has completed both her bachelor's and her master's from Rollins College. She worked in aerospace and GE corporate for over 10 years. She is also on the Board of Overseers for Graduate School of Business and on the board of Girls Inc. in Portland and Greater Seattle. Lori, if you don't mind saying hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Now, I could continue to tell you all the amazing things about Lori, but all the bios are also located in the chat, so please feel free to click on that and read along as well. Another panelist that we have is Rosine Johnson. She is the Executive Director for PACE Center for Girls. A few of her key achievements would be featured on Orlando Business Journal's Top 40 Under 40. She is also on Orlando Sentinel Top 10 People to Make Orlando a Better Place. She has held faculty positions at Lansing Community College as well as Michigan State University. Oh, just to throw this in there. A fun fact about Lori is her entire immediate family is a Rollins graduate. How phenomenal is that? So cheers and kudos to that. Back to Rosine, She has also been a published author. She is a published author and researcher in the field of child development. She's also been appointed by Governor Rick Scott to be on Valencia's Board of Trustees, and she loves Mike Jackson and has completed her mini MBA from Rollins. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Great to see you. Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
And last but not least, we have a phenomenal, inspirational entrepreneur. Her name is Stacey Engle. She is a little bit about Stacey. She has spent over 10 years as a key driver and senior leader with Fierce Conversations, a global training and leadership development company. Her leadership is instrumental in busting glass ceilings and glass revenues by increasing company sales and becoming company president with Fierce Conversations. Her opinions and ideas have been featured in Forbes, Fortune, CNBC, and Fast Company. She's also on the Board of Trustees for Take the Lead, a national nonprofit and social organization leading to create gender equality and equity in leadership by 2025. And she is a Rollins or Crummer MBA wannabe, so there's nothing wrong with that. Thank you so much, Stacey, for being here with us.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And Ayana.
Hello, everyone. So I will get us started with asking our fellow panelists a couple questions, and then I will open it up to the floor for all of you to get a chance to ask them some questions yourself. So my lovely panelists, the very first question, how have your leadership abilities translated throughout different roles that you have had?
Do you want us to jump in, Ayana?
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yes, that was good.
No problem. I've been at this a pretty long time. I think probably longer than most anyone on this call. So I'll play the old person card here a little bit. But I can honestly say that time and experience play a big role in how I translate leadership today. I think I'm a much better leader today than I was when I was 35 or 40. At least I believe that. Leadership, like so many things, is a learned skill, lots of trial and error. So I've had many years of practice. I've been fortunate in my career to have both formal and informal development opportunities to sharpen my skills. In my early career years, it really made a difference, I believe, in my growth trajectory, especially those formal opportunities. Early on, I selected companies with that in mind and worked for some very large organizations, GM, early in my career, and GE as well. That really provided a great foundation for being able to translate those skills to other industries. I've been working in healthcare for over 25 years. When I reflect on what influenced my leadership style, two things come to mind that I wanted to share. Keep in mind that I work in tech, so that's kind of the underpinning, but self-awareness, I believe, is key. I'm convinced that emotional intelligence is the #1 factor in one's ability not only to be a strong, empathetic, courageous leader, but also to be personally fulfilled in leadership. Not everybody is suited to leadership, and choosing what energizes you and what makes you happy is critical. Secondly, my children, all three who are now adults, have had a significant impact on my leadership style. As more and more millennials and now Gen Zers entered the workforce, I had to totally change my expectations, totally change my engagement style. And they really, really helped me recognize where I was off course and get me back on course.
Thank you for that. Stacey, if you'd like to go.
Sure. So just to add some context from my experience, the company Sia had shared Fierce Conversations. I was there for 10 and a half years until recently. And it was when the company was under 7 employees. So we were focused in building leadership capacity inside of all Fortune 5000 companies and then startups as well. So I share that from personal experience because I just left that chapter and I'm in my mid-30s. So I joke and say that's one of the longest relationships I've ever had in my life because my husband and I are at 7.5 together. So it still hasn't eclipsed that one. And when I think about leadership, it was really interesting because learning a lot about leadership going from building a company that then went global and is translated into multiple languages and training people all over the world. I was learning it formally in the leadership space, but then also very real incubation of trial and error, a lot of what Lori shared. But for me, I think a couple of key pieces and what my work is involved in now is around this idea of just really embodying your stories, your authenticity in leadership. I think it's really common regardless of stage because I work with people at all different stages of their career to be benchmarking against others and not do some of that work internally to share more of yourself, the elusive, I want to be more real, I want more authenticity in leadership. I think that it's never too late to start if you don't feel like you've really tapped into that, and it's something to pay attention to regardless of what stage you're at. And I learned that really early on. And then just the job descriptions and titles, and this is very true because I've always been more in small company, building, startup, and this idea that your title and your job description really is a launch pad. It's not a box, and you can decide and really shift a lot. Like you have a lot of choice, even at times where it may seem you don't. So those for me, like those two, authenticity stepping in and kind of stopping some of the talk of, am I like this or am I like this person? That, and then mixed with just this desire to grow and learn and make impact in different ways.
Thank you so much for that. And then Rosine.
Thank you. Wow, I agree with all that has been shared. The only thing that I can add to that is that really, I think for me personally, my leadership didn't necessarily change based on the environment, like where I worked. I think it changed based on the team that I was around. And what I mean by that is that a leader is really only as great as their team. And the key part of leadership is really not managing tasks or even managing people. It's about being able to offer a vision and being able to influence other people around you to tap into that vision where they feel that and believe, and you honor the fact that it is a shared vision. It may come from one person to begin with, but at the end, it really is the group's vision, right? And it's the leader's job to be able to not pull everyone along, but encourage everyone to come along because they believe in that. And I think for me, that's where I saw my leadership really begin to change based on the team that I either was gifted or that I crafted on my own. And so I think that for me was the biggest piece. And obviously remaining authentic, recognizing my worth and my value, and also recognizing that there are a group of people here with me and we're here to reach the same goal. So what can I do to help them reach their goals so the ultimate goal for the organization can be reached?
Thank you guys so much for those insights. And now our next question, and just so you're aware, Rosine, I will be starting with you. At what moment did you first realize that women face structural inequities in the workplace, and how were you able to overcome that?
Of course you give me this tough question first. Thank you. You know what? I will be honest with you. I think that some people call it Pollyanna, some people call it what have you. I will be very brutally honest with you. I didn't recognize that until I think I really started working in more social justice realms. And I'm not saying I didn't believe it was there. I will just be honest, I didn't see it because I was raised very differently. So just a quick connection here. You know, my parents had my brother and I later generation. And so this was the civil rights generation. My parents, they're not my grandparents, they're my parents. So they went through a lot of what we read about and see about in the 60s and 70s. That was their life, right? So these were the people marching and fighting and with picket signs and those types of things, really trying to make a change for our world. So when it came to my brother and I being born in the 80s, sorry, I just gave my age out, but whatever. So it came, you know, when we were born, we were really taught with a different skill set and a mindset. And that mindset was, it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. If you believe you can do it, you can. So I never really was faced with that until I started seeing other people, I'm just being honest, other people around me bringing that to my attention. So to kind of get to that point, when I started realizing there were structural inequities, it was really more connected to, it was really more connected to those around me that were having challenges, getting the jobs that they wanted, being able to move up the ladder. And a lot of it, in all honesty, I think had to do more with their mindset than what they had available to them. Now, will I say, have I seen or experienced institutional or structural issues that prevented people? 100%. 100%. And I think a lot of times it is so far deep, if you will, in the fine print, that until you really recognize that it is in policy or that it is something that is being carried out, you're not able to adapt to it. It was actually one of my male employers, I had a male supervisor who was actually one of my greatest mentors. And it was him that actually started showing me things of, you should have asked for more in this situation. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me I should have come and asked you for more money? Wait a minute. Well, first of all, thank you for telling me that. And two, thank you for opening my eyes to the fact that I didn't even realize that I could do that and that I was worth more than that. And so I think sometimes, at least for me, I had to be shown that that was there because it wasn't a part of my ready experience. And I hope that makes sense to everybody.
Thank you so much for that. Miss Lori, if you like to go.
Yes, thanks. I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable here. This is a really good segue from Rosine. This question created a lot of internal conflict for me because I had to take some time to reflect back. And I would say that for many years, I chose to ignore institutionalized discrimination, but preferring to believe that it really didn't exist. I mean, I totally bought into the idea of meritocracy. So, in my mind, I worked hard and I got what I deserved. I think I understand now that was sort of a safety mechanism for my own emotional well-being. Clearly, if I think about it long enough and I peel back the covers, I would say there was some level of structural inequity. It's been present all throughout my career and in different forms, some overt, but much more so in those kind of imperceptible ways, like the old boy network and so forth, kind of those impenetrable institutional structures that preserve the status quo. That would be more of my experience than overt sexism and so forth. But that leads me to how exciting it is to have these kinds of conversations. So they're so important. And most of my career, I didn't have forums or the opportunity to have open and transparent conversations about these topics with really many people at all, especially inside the workplace. For a couple of things. Number one, I spent most of my adult life on the East Coast of Florida. I know many of you are Floridians, some of you are probably grew up someplace else. It's a pretty conservative place. And most of the friends I had outside the workplace didn't work outside the home. So I didn't see myself in very many women that I interfaced with through most of my adult life. 5 years ago, I made a decision to move to the West Coast and go to Portland. And gosh, I wish I had made that decision 15 years ago. But the difference in the energy, especially from women, professional women, and the opportunities to engage in these kinds of conversations, to really advocate and be part of these really strong female communities has been a blessing, a special blessing at this point in my career. I guess it's one of those things where I didn't realize what I was missing till, and I'm just very grateful that I've had the opportunity to be part of that community and hope to continue to be for a long time to come.
Thank you so much for that. And Stacey?
I'll just add, so the last 10 and a half years working in building out leadership development programs and talent management, talent acquisition strategies for companies up to Fortune 100, it was very, very glaring. The lack of diversity in leader group. And companies are, I think for me, this is on a very personal level that just became really clear, which is a driver for why I do the work with Take the Lead, where we're about creating cohorts of people and industries that can really shift some of the dynamics. So that was big for me. And just, I mean, I think some memes and some things that have gone around in the last couple years have really started to highlight the glaring lack of diversity in a lot of different ways that is systemic and reinforced. And then from a personal side, I remember just from a recruiting standpoint, the types of feedback certain candidates, like female identifying candidates, that the interview committee would share with me, because I was a hiring manager often for the company. And it would just be women having the women candidates having very different standards in the interview committee's minds than the male. So for me, that became very glaring, and we did bring in unconscious bias training and did have help with that, because it shows up. And I'm glad we're having the conversations as well, like Lori said.
Thank you guys so much for that. And my last question for you all will be, and Stacey, I'll have you lead this one. How have your male colleagues advocated for you in your leadership roles, or how can they advocate for women in leadership roles?
Yes, well, I've had a lot of amazing mentors of all genders. And I think from the male perspective, I think paying attention, like, it does matter if there isn't representation. So that for me, I think having that conversation when it may be easier to shy away is one of the number one ways, especially if you are in a decision-making capability, paying attention to that. I think on a very real level, it's just pointing out, especially like Lori said, if there is that old boys network or some of the cliques, which, I mean, I struggle because I think this shows up in so many different, it's not just a gender context, but when you see those things, acknowledge them, talk about them. No one is perfect. So I think those are my two. It's paying attention, and then also actively engaging and recognizing. So for instance, the example I gave with the interviewing, there was often commentary on a candidate who was female around approachability or warmth, when those things would never really be shared with male candidates. Like, oh, he wasn't warm or he's not approachable, but it's this. I mean, that's a very gender specific orientation that a lot of people have. So anyway, like, it's just paying attention a little more and getting educated on some of the nuance of this, because I don't think it's always the overt, well, I'll mentor you, or I can open this door for you. And of course, if you can, that's a great thing too.
Thank you so much. And then Lori, if you like to take it next.
Well, so the position I take on this is that most men don't know how to advocate for women. I imagine I speak for a lot of folks on this call when I say that, many men have yet to be fully enlightened that women will, in the not too distant future, rule the world. They're preferring to ignore that fact. I think that I have plenty of supportive men in my life, but I think generally, if I look across the landscape of my career, both over the last 25, 30 years and today, there aren't enough men who know how to advocate for women. With regard to supportive men and women in my life, I was fortunate to be born into a family with a mother and a father who did encourage me. I think similar to what Rosine was saying, to be strong, smart, and bold. And I've been married, Stacey, almost 40 years to a wonderful man who has been since we met, my biggest fan. And I currently work for an organization that recognizes the value of all individuals, notwithstanding race, gender, and sexual orientation. In terms of the workplace, as I mentioned before, it's the first time in my career that I can actually say that. And so that's a rather sobering, commentary, to say the least. I think an important point here in terms of advocacy is that every leader needs a support system outside of work. You need people who can lift you up and help you maintain your authenticity. Sometimes you can get that at work, but often you need that outside. But it's critical that you have that. You have people who are reinforcing your value, whether it's inside or outside the workplace.
Thank you so much. And then Rosine?
I think two words really come to mind, and I definitely echo my colleagues here, Stacey and Lori. Two words really come to mind for me, and one is empathy. I think whenever you are tasked with advocating for someone, it's really difficult to advocate when there is no empathy. And empathy is more than just listening. Empathy is listening with the intention to understand. And I think if more men and sometimes women will really listen to understand an individual's experience and not prescribe it to gender, ethnic background, et cetera, but really listen to the individual's experience, that's where true advocacy begins, right? Because yes, Lori and Stacey and I are all women, but we've all had different experiences and we all need different things when someone advocates for us. So it's about getting to the person and not just the shell. So empathy really comes up to me. The second word for me is really integrity. And I heard a lot of that in what Stacey was mentioning. And when we're talking about interviewing or when we're talking about conversations behind doors, open doors, all those types of things, that really comes down to an ethical integrity level for me of recognizing that that there are some philosophical pieces that are just right. There are truths, and when you have the ability to have integrity with that and without judging people, without making assumptions, that really leads to beyond just empathy. That's a person of integrity. And those people that I think she was speaking of, to me, that screams lack of integrity, because they wouldn't want someone to speak about them like that. Why would I do the same thing for someone else? I also think, just quickly, that for women, as I mentioned before, some of my greatest mentors have been males. And frankly, in my career, I have only had 2 female supervisors, if you will, or 2 females in leadership that were above me, whether it be a board chair or what have you. So it was very, very interesting to me when I worked with women, to be honest, because in all of my career, even in nonprofits, most of the people I have worked with consistently were males. But the key to that is that I had to be able to be open to receive that advocacy and that mentorship. Because I think a lot of time, if we go in assuming that they aren't going to care or they aren't going to help, we miss out on moments. Like I said, when my boss at the time said, wait a minute, you should actually ask for more and I'm going to give you more, I would have missed that moment if I wasn't open to that mentorship in that moment. And so I think that's really key. And that's really the flip side of empathy, right? It's a two-way street. So being empathetic to their experience and really allowing that help to come when it's available.
Thank you so much, panelists, for the answers of those questions. And now I will open it up to anyone on this call. You may unmute yourselves to ask either one, or open it up to all of our panelists, a question that you might have, as well as messaging in the chat box. If you are uncomfortable with having your message being displayed publicly, feel free to private message either myself or Kyle Sawyer on here.
Hi. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, Heidi, you're good.
All right, just in the middle of traffic. I'm heading to the gym right now, but I had to get listen to this conversation. But first off, I just want to say thank you to all the panelists for being here. Thank you for the success team for doing this. This was definitely very informative for me. But my question goes to pretty much anyone that feels like answering this question. What advice would you give to, you know, a young female, a young woman that wants to go into a male dominated, that wants to, you know, make a difference? Personally for me, I think that I carry it. My demeanor isn't necessarily that I'm afraid of working in a male dominated field, but how can I make a difference and not, to my male counterparts, like feel like I'm dominating them, like I'm on a mission to like just dominate, you know what I mean? Like I hope that makes some sort of sense. Maybe the language isn't really the way I should have went about it, but you know, we're in traffic and you know, it's all right. But thank you if you don't mind answering that, anyone.
Drive safely, Heidi.
You know, I will jump in. Hi there, Heidi. This might seem a little contradictory to what I said earlier, but it's really interesting about the words that you used, because of having worked with so many males. They do go into the workplace saying, I am going to dominate and I'm going to win. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's 100% nothing wrong with saying, I am going to be the top of that leaderboard. I am going to be the top salesperson. I'm going to outsell everybody. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think you go in as authentic as you are. And that's what I think is sometimes, I think we miss sometimes as females, is that we assume that we have to be other than ourselves, or we assume we also can't dominate. No. If you want to play, then we can all play, and you can win and I can win, because there's enough for all of us to win. Just because you win today doesn't mean that I can't win tomorrow. We can all win. So personally, I think you go in with that and recognizing that it's not about dominating anybody else. It's about you recognizing your worth, standing tall in your worth, and being able to stand shoulder to shoulder with your colleague that you also will collaborate with, but you can both collaborate together and win. So in other words, don't shrink back. They're not, so why should you?
Such a powerful ending. I love that. Thank you so much, Rosine. And Marilyn, I see that you have your hand up in the chat function. You may unmute yourself.
Hey, thanks, Ayana. I actually have a couple questions, but I'll keep it to one for now. So this is kind of just piggybacking off of what we were just talking about. But Rosina, I really liked what you said earlier about when you go into a team, sometimes you're either gifted that team or you might have created it. I like the usage of the word gifted, because reality is sometimes we walk into a team with very opposing views from your own, which is great. Diversity of thought is definitely encouraged, whether it's voluntary or not. But my question is, have you experienced a situation where you are in a team that doesn't necessarily share the vision that you have? And how do you, first of all, communicate with them, effectively without backing down from your own personal style and who you really are?
Well, thank you for that question. I'll answer it quickly so my colleagues can as well. I think that's just, at some point you have to become honest, right? And not saying you're not honest to begin with, but at some point a transparent conversation needs to take place, because I think what I've learned along the way is that usually when a person feels they need to separate from a job, they already know it in their heart that this is not where they need to be. And you holding on is not making it any easier. That's where that honest conversation of, this is the direction that we're headed, and for whatever reason, this doesn't seem like it's aligning with what you may believe or value. What you believe or value is important, and we honor that. We're going this way though. So if that's not the way that you're choosing to go, that's okay. Let's talk about how we transition you and help you get to a place that's more aligned with what you do. I think you just have to have the honest conversation, because even though they're gifted to you for a season. It may not be for the entire ride. It just may be for a portion of it. And you both have to know when it's time to get off.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have a question? Again, feel free to unmute yourself or ask in the chat box.
We have a question in the chat. This is for all panelists. What can young men who are lower in the chain of command do to help women excel and grow in the workplace?
Well, be a good colleague. I mean, I guess I would suggest that you do that for both males and females in the workplace, right? Be a good colleague, be a collaborator, be supportive. I think we talked about integrity a little bit earlier. And so it's really about demonstrating you support each other and articulating the individual's value. And I think everyone needs that, whether they're male or female, especially early part of your career, having people articulate the value you bring to a team, even if you're a peer and not a leader of that individual, it goes a really long way.
I love that, Lori. I'll tag on to that because there is research that shows women do not praise themselves outwardly as much as males. So I think that's something from a tip perspective of just really when you see something fantastic happening, depending on your position, making sure that you acknowledge that, but also that you're sharing that with your leader or other influential people inside of the organization, so that is advocacy. That is paying attention.
And I want to add to that, Stacey, because this is something that I think is really a big deal. I'm going to generalize here, and I apologize, but I'll use myself. I have never had a need for a lot of praise, because often you're being praised for things that you think to yourself, like, this is what I do. It's like, I do this. Like, you don't have to praise me. This isn't over and above. This is my bar, right? But then you see others getting praised for things. It's really confusing. And I just think to your point, it's the way women think about themselves in the context of the whole. And you probably have data behind that tells us why we feel that way. But it really does underscore the need to verbally and articulate and publicly articulate the value of women.
Alrighty, there is a question from the chat, and this is for all panelists. In your experience, have you found that women in leadership tend to compete with each other or uplift each other? And with that, how can we as women be better allies for one another? And again, this is open to all panelists.
I'll just say that in my experience, women tend to be allies. I've seen, and more, there are consortiums and women's leadership groups and industry groups that are often focused on the needs of women, where you're able to find communities to really uplift. So my experience have been women as allies.
That's been my experience as well. In the early journey with growing Fierce Conversations, there were 2 other women who were basically my counterparts in leading the company and growing it, and they're tremendous mentors and support for me, and that kind of trickled throughout the organization. So I witnessed a lot of allyship. I think that dialogue and even that women catfighting, all of those terms that are used are really terms to pay attention to if people frame the conversation that way, because I think that's dangerous. So my experience is allyship, and I think the idea of helping recognize, and I really think this is a people thing. This isn't just because imposter syndrome, whatever you call it, we all need to acknowledge what makes us strong and what we do well and what our strengths are. So I say start there and don't just give it out to the females.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's all about collaboration and not competition, right? And where I have seen competition, it's usually because there are outside forces that are really coming in to try to bring in self-doubt, issues of unworthiness and insecurity. And once those are, that's not typically the female, it is generally, again, an outside force that is doing that. And so I would agree with my colleagues that most of the time there have been amazing allyships and just wonderful collaborations.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else? If there's another question, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand in the chat. Oops, sorry about that.
I have another one in the chat, Ayana, if you don't have any others right now.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah, ladies, is there a female leader today or a woman who is paving the way, who you see who is paving the way for women in today's society?
Well, there's so many different ways to answer that. Instead of taking the obvious answer, I'm going to share that one thing that I do is search out companies that are run by female CEOs, and I invest in those companies. So that's one way I feel like I can take an action, a personal action to support that. Certainly there are not enough women. The numbers I think are in the single digits of the Fortune 500. But GM has a female CEO, and just until recently, Lockheed Martin as well had it. So they exist, but that is one step I take in an effort to lift those women up.
Well, I think about the historic one in the past few months with Whitney Hurd, who just IPO'd Bumble with literally a baby on her hip, which for me, that is trailblazing, because I do believe systemically, until we solve for childcare and we solve for how we orient to family in America, we're not going to get to gender parity with leadership, just right smack dab in the middle of childbearing years, kind of at the end, actually at 35. It's a relevant issue that I'm embodied in. So Kyle, when I think about that question, I think it's a big societal one as well. So I love that she had her baby at the IPO.
That was definitely an amazing moment to be able to see. And so I would agree. And I also think that there are women locally that are shattering ceilings and creating legacies right among us. And two happen to be a mother-daughter duo that I know, and that's Stacey and Ariana Pierce. They are both serial entrepreneurs. Dr. Stacey has 3 doctorates. She is a business entrepreneur that helps other females create their own company. So she's creating a legacy in her own of, and has created over 27 millionaires, female millionaires from her own company. But then, and attached to that, she has a daughter who's been in business since she was 13, doing the exact same thing. And that speaks to what Stacey was mentioning, that idea of legacy, right? She's creating a path, and now she's creating another path for her daughter, who now at early 30s has 6 businesses under her own right as well. So I think there are plenty, and yes, there are some all around our world, but I also just wanted to say there are some right here in our backyard doing amazing, amazing things. So you don't have to look far for those females that are trailblazing, doing awesome things.
Thank you guys for that. I do have another question in the chat. How have you managed or overcome imposter syndrome? And this is open to anyone.
So I think it's an ongoing challenge. I don't know how the others feel. Once again, we are at very different points in our career, and we started at different times. So, it's pretty good. It's a pretty nice stratified group here. But I think it's something I always deal with in one way, shape, or form. Once again, self-awareness is important, right? Recognizing who you are, being authentic to yourself, and also searching out inputs from those around you, both inside the workplace and outside. It's super helpful to get validation, right? We all need validation, and I think that kind of can help you. So recognizing when it's starting to seep in and taking some, strategic action is kind of how I approach that.
Thank you for that. And then this one, if another panelist would like to take on this question, how do you position yourself so that you're not seen as just the secretary or, the mom that that we are there to help the males in the group keep track of things? Like, how do we position ourselves as this leader and not necessarily as the mom of the group?
I'm only laughing because when I first became an ED, I was very, very young. I think I was like 23, 24 years old. And I'm laughing because I wasn't mistaken for the secretary, I was mistaken for the intern. And so I was like, wait, what? So I'm laughing because I have been mistaken for lots of things, secretaries, interns, what have you. That was an interesting moment. And, maybe I was a little too sassy that day because I honestly wasn't having it. I just pointed to my name tag that said, at that time, my maiden name, but Rosine Cobb's executive director. And I said, I'm the person you need to speak to. So I don't advise everybody to do that, depending on how much sass you want to have that day, how much coffee, that's up to you. But in all honesty, though, I think for me personally, the way that you position yourself is positioning yourself in the position that you are in. And if you are not the secretary, there's nothing wrong with being a secretary. Let me be clear about that, because we all have levels and we all grow. But if you are in that leadership role, you can position yourself by the way that you speak, by the way you carry yourself, by your outside image as well as your inside image, your internal. You can position yourself as that leader so that others are not mistaking you for a position that you're not in. And just to piggyback on the last question, that was a great question about imposter syndrome. And I do think it's something that can stay with us. I think, in all honesty, for me, journaling helps me, because when I sit back and I write down my wins, when I write down things that I have done, those are things that nobody can take away from me. Yes, a team helped me and all of that, but at the beginning and end of the day, this is something that I did. When you look back and read what you have created, it's almost like creating your own resume for yourself. That will help eradicate that imposter syndrome, because you'll know you're not a fraud, because this is what you did and what you accomplished. So journalizing really helps me to be able to do that.
Thank you so much for that powerful insight. And then this is just the last question that I'll be asking. Women are less likely to negotiate for salary, raises, promotions. How do you advise other women to negotiate? And this is open to any panelist.
I'll jump in because I actually think it's related to the last question, because at the end of the day, I do really believe everyone is a leader. You're a leader of maybe people, but you're a leader of results, projects, things. So it's a mentality that helps with imposter syndrome as well. But then when it comes to negotiating or thinking about another position, thinking about a different place you want to be, I think the number one miss, this is also with men, but women more, is attaching the value you're driving. So there are reasons why jobs have certain salaries. There are reasons why, you know, certain people are in rooms, and part of it is because you're willing to take on driving certain value. And that's a journey, but I think that's just the number one miss. It's not okay to want it's not okay to want to be in a different destination and not do what it takes to get there. And that's what I think a lot of people miss in negotiations. So if you have a negotiation upcoming or thinking about it, get very clear on what you're willing to put your name on, because everyone who does get those promotions or does get some of the salary increase, there's an exchange. There's cost benefit to everything. Hence why some of the people I work with, one of their comments is this it? It's this like, oh, I'm C-level. I work so hard. Now I have more stress. I have money I can't even spend on, like, there's always a cost. There's always so that reflection in a negotiation of like, why am I wanting this? And what value am I willing to drive? This isn't just about you. And that's the number one miss I see, because I've had lots of people negotiate with me and then negotiating company-wise and also job-wise. So that would be my takeaway. What value are you driving and what are you willing to sign up for? And then you can ask for the title, the more money, all of that.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for answering those questions. And thank you, audience, for your great, powerful questions. I will be putting, with the permission of the panelists, be putting their LinkedIn information in the chat box in a little bit. And I'll be passing it over to Melissa to close us out.
Thank you, Ayana, and thank you, panelists, for your wonderful insights. This has been a wonderful hour with you. Of the many great points made during the event today here, I just have some key takeaways to be mindful of to take with you this evening. Regarding how leadership has attributed to transitioning into your various roles, being self-aware and having that emotional intelligence is very important. Embodying your authenticity in leadership. It can be common to stage those benchmarks, as they mentioned, against others, as opposed to looking internally, which actually really spoke out. Being able to lead changed leadership is changed based on teams you're surrounded by. So the key aspect to being a manager is being able to really offer that vision, to get the buy-in and get everyone else to join that vision with you. It will, whether it's a team that you were gifted or one that you did create, that is a critical part to leadership and development, as your team can be successful as a whole. Structural inequalities in the workplace, as we know, can be very uncommon. It may not be so obvious. It may be very obvious, I think, depending on a lot of our environments. But being mindful of that is very critical, especially in today's world, and being open to having that conversation. It's very important to have that conversation to kind of put an end to that lack of diversity, and working to be mindful of this as a leader, and being open, having that open door. And then finally, my last point, with male colleagues advocating for women in leadership roles, paying attention to having that representation, and most importantly, identifying when your male counterparts are offering to help, and being open to that as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. And I just want to close us out and say thank you so much to Rosine, Lori, Stacey. We enjoyed your insight and your advice. I think no matter where you are in your career, your professional journey, you definitely take something away from today. I know for me, I'm like, oh, this goal list that keeps getting longer. I better go start working on some of these goals. So I feel very motivated and ready to go. So I'm sure everybody else does too. I want to say thank you to our Student Leadership Advisory Board, Programming Committee, specifically Ayana, great job with those questions. Melissa, thank you for wrapping us up. Sia, thank you for those introductions. And Kyle, our behind the scenes man that's been letting all the people in from the waiting room. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for a wonderful final event for the Center for Leadership Development. I hope you all will join us again. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.